to the Young Turks Thursday show. Thursday show, but not panel show. Anna Kasparian and myself, John Idarola, just us two.
Hi.
A small show. Hello, Anna. How's it going?
How's it doing?
Yeah, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah, I'm doing good too. Obviously, Cenk is not in the studio. That's clear. He will be back, I believe, tomorrow for the power panel. We're going to have our usual Friday power panel. But today, just me and Anna. I think it's going to be fun.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've hosted
Ebola
together. Yeah. I mean, today is basically update after update after update of Ebola stories, but we do have some really interesting political debates to talk about in the first hour, which I can't wait for.
Yeah. No, we've got some debate footage that shows, well, I was going to say everything that's wrong with American politics, but there's so much wrong, no video could show it all.
Right.
It just shows how substance-free American politics has become and how obsessed with its own, I guess, like theatricality and grandeur. And it's probably going to make you sick as it made us sick. But why don't we start off with Ebola? Everybody's talking about it. Why shouldn't we talk about it as well? As Ebola continues to dominate the news, calls continue for a travel ban for flights originating from West Africa and traveling to the United States. As a second person was found to have contracted the disease Ebola, you saw more of those calls, and certainly as it's likely that more people will get Ebola in the United States, in the EU, you should expect more and more of those. And so we're going to talk about the calls for the travel ban, those who are fighting back against it in government, and why I at least don't think that it would be an effective means to control or get rid of Ebola. So first of all, this is not a small thing in government. I mean, we have a list of lawmakers who are in favor of it. It's this long list. We're not going to show you all the names. For the most part, it is Republicans, although there are a few Democrats on the list, including Representative Alan Grayson of Florida, a personal friend of the network. Some of the Democrats, for the most part, are on the list because they're in extremely tight races and they feel like that would give them some sort of boost in the election. And those on the record against the travel ban, including Henry Cuellar, Gene Green, Bernice Johnson, generally Texas Democrats who have banded together to show that they don't think that it's a necessary or useful thing to do right now. And we have some quotes from Democrats who are fighting against this sort of argumentation, including Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, who says, who's a Republican, by the way, I don't think we gain anything by spending our time talking about quarantines of entire countries. We don't have an epidemic, and for that reason, I don't think that calling for a quarantine of countries answers the question. We have to turn internally and look at our own selves and make sure our health infrastructure is where it needs to be. We also have a quote from Representative Gwen Moore, a Democrat of Wisconsin, who says, aside from being impractical, this reactionary strategy will force Ebola patients underground, making it nearly impossible to track their movements, hinder the capacity for international healthcare workers to transport and administer critical aid, and erode the continent's fragile economy. Now, Gwen Moore is probably going to get attacked in the near future for seeming to care at all about the African economy, because already Republicans are making clear that if you care at all about that and not just 100% about American lives, then there's something wrong with you, perhaps communistic. So we have lots more information that we're going to go over, but what's your immediate reaction to this?
So far, all of the commentary I've heard from experts that are worth listening to on this very topic have indicated that it is a bad idea to do a travel ban. Now, I completely understand the thinking and the rationale behind wanting a travel ban. I'm not an expert, so if I look at this story on its face, I'll think, yeah, absolutely. We should stop all flights going to and from West Africa. That makes all the sense in the world. But the reality is you need to ensure that aid gets to that part of the world. You need to ensure that you help them through a humanitarian effort to contain this virus, to stop the spread of the virus. That's the best way to deal with it. I mean, spreading education to that area is also very important because one of the reasons why it spread so quickly was due to ignorance. And it was ignorance and also a lack of trust toward healthcare professionals in West Africa, right? So I would focus on that. And look, if people really want to travel to and from West Africa, they'll find a way, regardless of how much you want to ban flights. And I think that that's actually more dangerous because then it's going to be more difficult to screen people that could have potentially had contact with someone with Ebola there. And also, I love how we're all pretending as though West Africa is like the size of Los Angeles. I mean, we're talking about multiple countries in one region of the world where, yes, the economy is tied to it. You have people going back and forth because they have family members there. You need to get aid there. I mean, it's not a simple, clear-cut solution. And I think a lot of these politicians are worried about name recognition. They're worried about their image. So they're like, let's ban let's ban flights there because, you know, a lot of people are buying into the fear-mongering that they're seeing on places like Fox News.
Yeah, you raised a couple of great points there. I mean, in terms of like the fact that it's not LA, like people are acting as if it's like one mini mall and then a corner, and that's all that's Nigeria. Nigeria has 160 million people. They have a few cases of Ebola. You could do a marathon every day around Nigeria and not come across a single person who had been even exposed to the disease.
Let me just give you some more details on Nigeria, which I found fascinating. Nigeria had only 19 confirmed cases of Ebola. It was the only country that successfully contained the virus. And they did so through a very, very smart effort. They did screenings. Anyone who came into contact with the individuals who were diagnosed with Ebola were kept an eye on, and they had to give health updates. If they didn't respond back to any of the health updates, authorities would go visit them and make sure that everything was okay. So look, they had a really great effort there that worked. It proved to be successful. They didn't have any flight bans, so why don't we focus more on what they did, which was obviously very successful, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction to this.
Yeah. And the other point that you brought up that I want to address is that we need to spread information, education to that area. And this is one of the most distressing things about this entire endeavor since the outbreaks began in West Africa is we had this opportunity to do some good in the world as a country. Like we try, like some people will say that that's what we tried to do in Iraq and Afghanistan through nation building. I disagree with that. But regardless, we could have done something good in West Africa. We're sending some resources, we're sending some soldiers, but we could have spread information and awareness as well. That is effectively impossible for the media to do now because they can't even do it domestically.
I know.
Amongst a population in America who knows almost nothing about Ebola, desperately wants information, new studies showing that the more news you've been exposed to concerning Ebola, the less you actually know about it, the less accurate information you have about it.
And
no wonder that people are terrified. We did a video on TYT today, 7 reasons not to be terrified about Ebola. There are only about 5,000 ways more likely for you to die in America today than Ebola, and yet we're worked into a frenzy because that's all the media is talking about. A few months ago, they thought that their plane was going to go missing. Then they thought ISIS would kill them, and now they think they're going to get Ebola, and it's the media's fault.
It is the media's fault, and it really goes back to the business model of the media here in the United States, right? It's very much profit-driven, and how do you make profit? You get higher ratings. How do you get higher ratings? You sensationalize news stories, right? And when you sensationalize a story like this and you fearmonger, yes, you get more people watching, but you spread this misinformation that causes so much damage to your society and to other countries.
Yeah, that's totally the case. We've got some information on the economic cost of it too, which we'll get to soon. But finally, one point I want to address is it may seem to some people, like reasonable people in the middle, who hear about a potential travel ban, and they hear from the right and some Democrats that this will help, and they hear from the left that it won't actually help that much. It could be counterproductive. And many reasonable people will hear those two positions and say, well, just in case, why don't we do it? Not understanding that there are very real reasons that you shouldn't do it. Now, look, right now, what would a travel ban actually accomplish? It would do one specific thing. It would stop planes from leaving West Africa and landing in America. That is not the only way to get to America. If people actually, as Anna said, if they want to, then they'll simply go to South America or the EU, and then they'll take another flight. And the difference between what we have now and what we'd have in that case is now we can't track them anymore. We have no idea where they originated from necessarily.
Absolutely.
It makes it so much harder to actually track and contain the disease. Right now, it may seem dangerous, it may seem overly risky, but it makes for an easier containment situation overall.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about why the media is talking about it as much as they are. So you touched on one, they want the money, the sensationalism, the ratings, they're certainly getting that. But there's also obviously a political motive to doing this. And I think it's summed up pretty well in an editorial by Mark Siegel of the National Review. You've probably seen him on Fox News before if you've accidentally stumbled onto that channel. And here he is talking about why we should do the travel ban, even though he personally, as a doctor, doesn't think that it would help. He says, we must worry about our own public psyche here in the United States. If our leaders can't give us a sense that we are protected, we must achieve it by imposing a ban. I'm not convinced medically.
What?
I don't believe that a travel ban against the Ebola-afflicted countries in West Africa will be particularly effective. It may even be counterproductive, and it certainly isn't coming from the strongest side of what being an American means. But as fear of Ebola and fear of our leaders' ineptitude grows, I think we must have a ban to patch our battered national psyche. psyche. So here he, as a doctor, is saying it's not going to help, it may be counterproductive, but because all of you are so terrified, perhaps by watching the network that I am a medical representative and correspondent for, you're so terrified that we should do something that will actually make us less safe, just so that you might feel a little bit safer in the short run. And F you, Obama, by the way.
That was the most absurd thing I have ever heard. He just said the travel ban is probably going to be counterproductive. But we should probably do what some of our misguided constituents and misguided talk show hosts want, because we want them to feel better and sleep easy at night.
Yeah.
Even though this is actually going to make the problem worse.
It could actually make it worse.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and
wow.
Like he casually says, might be counterproductive. What does that mean? That the only thing that could mean is that more people could die from Ebola. Let's worry about the psyche. We'll worry about the people dying of this disease another time.
I don't care about anyone's psyche. What I care about is making sure that we contain the virus. And if this is going to be counterproductive, then this so-called professional and this so-called expert has no reason to have a platform to spew this kind of ignorance.
Yeah. And by the way, you can write whatever you want on the internet, but after you write what we just read for you, he should no longer be a part of Fox News' medical A team with Keith Ablow. That's a team you can trust for your medical needs. So another thing that I think is kind of interesting about the travel ban is if the idea is that there are these cases of Ebola in Sierra Leone, Liberia, before in Nigeria, you know what? Damn that whole part of the world. Let's put a travel ban on it. Okay, well, we've got now 2 confirmed cases of Ebola in Texas. Shouldn't we have a travel ban from Texas to other parts of the country? We don't want it spreading after all. And as we're going to cover later in the show, apparently some people have been exposed to it, have been taking flights. So that question was asked of a representative of Speaker John Boehner, and this is the response. Asked if Boehner also believes that flights from Texas to other parts of the country should be halted, Boehner spokesman Kevin Smith, not the director, said by email, Obama should consider a temporary ban on travel to the U.S. from countries afflicted with the virus, along with any other appropriate actions. That's where we are right now. Don't have anything more. But which is it? Is it that there's so much of a risk that we can't possibly allow them to fly regardless of the potential costs or risks of shutting it down? Or it's not a big deal? Which is it? You seem to think it's not a big deal when it's potentially white people flying on the planes with Ebola. People from Africa, that's a little bit scarier. Now, thankfully, some people are being a little bit more level-headed, a little bit more reasonable about Ebola, and you can get some actual accurate medical information, not just from the Young Turks and TYT-10. So Shep Smith took to the airwaves on Fox News, and despite the fact that around the clock on Fox News, generally you're just going to have fear-mongering and misinformation about Ebola, he took upon himself, as he often does, to tell the truth, to be honest to his audience about the actual risks of that disease. Here's a snippet of that.
For the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the facts on Ebola. For the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the facts on Ebola. It'll take just 3 minutes. But first, today, given what we know, you should have no concerns about Ebola at all. None, I promise. Unless a medical professional has contacted you personally and told you of some sort of possible exposure, fear not. Do not listen to the hysterical voices on the radio and the television or read the fear-provoking words online. The people who say and write hysterical things are being very irresponsible. You have to remember that in the middle of all of this, you have to remember that there is politics in the mix. With midterm elections coming, the party in charge needs to appear to be effectively leading. The party out of power needs to show that there is a lack of leadership. So the president has canceled a fundraising trip and is holding meetings, and his political opponents are accusing his administration of poor leadership. For the purpose of this fact dissemination exercise, those matters are immaterial. Again, these are the facts. We do not have an outbreak of Ebola in the United States, nowhere. We do have 2 healthcare workers who contracted the disease from a dying man. They are isolated. Suggestions have been made publicly that leaders and medical professionals may be lying to us. Those suggestions are completely without basis in fact. There is no evidence of any kind of which we at Fox News are aware that leaders have lied about anything regarding Ebola. I report to you with certainty this afternoon that being afraid at all is the wrong thing to do. Being petrified, and that's a quote, is ridiculous. We don't have an outbreak. We have 2 sick people from 1 dying man. And the rest of this should stop because it's not productive. And it's not worth ratings, and it's not worth politics, and we all need to stop it.
God damn, that is the best 2 minutes of Fox News in the last couple of years, at least.
In Fox News history. No, Shep Smith every once in a while will do a segment where he's throwing his colleagues under the bus.
Yeah.
And you get a peek into who he really is, right? Because I think that in reality, he's a pretty reasonable guy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure he said a lot of crazy things in the past.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that he's addressing this, but at the same time, and of course it's because he can't, he doesn't address the fact that it's his very network that does the fear-mongering. So when he's used the word irresponsible there, I was like, damn, right? And his colleagues are like off to the side with like pitchforks. Yeah.
Their faces are smushed against the glass, you son of a bitch.
They're ready to get him.
Yeah, there's going to be some awkward hallway conversation as a result of that. Andre Tantaros getting in his face. But thank you, Shep Smith, for being willing to do that. There will be a cost to pay for Shep Smith. I don't know how ironclad his contract is, but he was throwing his colleagues under the bus for economic reasons for doing the fear-mongering that they're doing, but he also threw the Republican Party, the main correspondents and guests that they have constantly. Like, all around, he was willing to throw them under the bus. Now, to be fair, we do have to say that in terms of accurate medical information, CNN and MSNBC, for the most part in the past few weeks, have been a little better than Fox News. They're willing to bring on authors who've written entirely fictional works, non-doctors who've written entirely fictional works about Ebola, and pass them off as experts. They're willing to speculate dangerously about the likelihood that it'll become airborne when there's no current reason to believe that that's going to be the case. So they have been a little better, but I love what Shep Smith said there. And like the whole sensationalizing of it, that's one thing. But that doesn't bother me as much as the political motivations for Republicans like Louis Gohmert and Ted Cruz being willing to attack the president for saying he's okay with Americans dying as a result of that. They're trying to win an election. We need to stop pretending that it's just fear about disease. Now, certainly conservatives are scared most of the time about most things, and so I have no doubt that they are actually fairly terrified about Ebola having an outbreak in America. But right now, I don't think they care at all about that, and their willingness to push for a travel ban when they know that it's counterproductive, that it might lead to more dead West Africans, more dead Europeans, more dead Americans, that they think that that's a small price to pay for Obama's approval rating going down a little bit, for raising the turnout rate for Republicans in the midterm elections. The fact that they're willing to do that shows that they're not just lacking in empathy and compassion, and we've known that for a long time, but they are outright evil when it comes to trying to push for their party to win in this election. They're willing to let people suffer and die of Ebola if it means that they might have 1% higher chance of taking the Senate.
So obviously that doesn't speak highly of the Republican Party, but I will also say that today as I was reading about this story, there were multiple sources that talked about what the Obama administration is planning to do in response to these demands to, basically institute a travel ban, right? And a spokesperson for the Obama administration said that that is not off the table, which worries me, right? Because on one side, you have the Republican Party using this for political gain, but is Obama, who in the past has done concession after concession, going to cave on this particular issue, knowing that it's going to be counterproductive? I don't know, and a huge part of me is really scared that he will cave because he has a very bad track record of doing so.
I think that if there's a bet to be had on whether or not Obama will cave, whether the Democrats will show weakness on something when they undoubtedly could win, I think you should take that bet. But yeah, and the final point that I want to make about this is that we know that in natural disaster and outbreaks, there's always huge costs associated with containment and cleanup and things like that. And you can expect that with with Ebola, there's going to be a massive cost to pay as well. But I thought it was interesting. World Health Organization Director Margaret Chan said that 90% of any outbreak's economic costs come from irrational and disorganized efforts of the public to avoid infection. So there's a cost to be paid, but we're going to pay it willingly because of our own irrationality and unwillingness to learn the truth about Ebola. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is yesterday there was footage of this mystery man that was in no hazmat suit walking behind those who were transporting the now Ebola-inflicted nurse. So let's show that footage, and then we actually have an identification of who that is. You're seeing the footage there, her being transferred from an ambulance to the plane. People in white suits, and then the one guy wearing a button-up shirt.
How brave are these healthcare workers who are treating her,
Yeah.
you know, and transporting her and basically dealing with the situation. They're like on the front lines of the Ebola fight.
Yeah.
And I don't think we give them enough credit.
Yeah, I think you're totally right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's more visible now, but I mean, there were people over there a year ago trying to help deal with Ebola in areas where it was there, or let alone other diseases as well, knowing that there's a chance that over the course of their career they will be exposed to and possibly get one of these diseases. So that mystery man walking around without a hazmat suit, surrounded by people in hazmat suits, doesn't just seem to be like improperly dressed for the event. It seems dangerous because we're worried about people contracting this. He has been identified, and so let's see. The mystery man was identified as a medical safety coordinator with Phoenix Air, the U.S. transportation company that has provided air ambulance services for several Ebola patients. The safety coordinator couldn't wear gear so he can act as the team's eyes and ears on the tarmac. They didn't want him to be as constrained in terms of what he can hear and see. They're trained to keep a safe distance from patients. Phoenix Air says it has transported 11 Ebola patients and no crew members have contracted the virus up until this point. That is all well and good. He needs to put on something.
Yeah, he must be compensated handsomely.
Yeah.
I would not do that job. I have no interest in that.
Look, to be totally fair, we know that the way that you contract the disease is direct contact with the bodily fluids in one form or another of a person. So just being nearby, he will not necessarily get the disease. That said, when you're that close to someone who you know has the disease, not a bad idea to put something on, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Why don't we push on and do Rick Scott before we head to our first break?
I think we should take a break.
You think so?
Yeah, just because it's a totally different topic. Let's take a quick break.
No more Ebola. Yeah, we'll clear things out.
Rick Scott's story, probably my favorite story of the day.
Yeah, that when we come back from this break.
You might have heard the Colbert Report is dead.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Colbert! Down goes Colbert! I'm told something about a promotion and David Letterman's job. Who cares? Okay, he's done with. Now, we celebrate this because I'm given to understand some of you used to watch Daily Show and Colbert Report on Hulu. Now, I got nothing but love for those guys. Keep watching The Daily Show. Am I not merciful? But get rid of that has-been Colbert and put in the Young Turks next to it, okay? So every morning, a little bit of Daily Show, a little bit of Young Turks. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying Hulu.com/The Young Turks. Colbert. TYT sends its regards.
I like your version of the song better, I think. We should record a cover, I think, as they say. So really fast before we get into our last story or two, I do want to do the member shout-outs for today. First, I want to recognize member number 3085, Peter Lindquist. Thank you very much. And member number 1821, Brandon Adams. Thank you for supporting us, especially Brandon, number 1800. He's been around for a while. Thank you all the more. No, thank you to both of you, obviously. And I saw one hashtag TYT Live I really liked. It's from Nicholas Weil, who says, "No electronic gadgets, but the candidates themselves can be robots."
Oh, I like that.
That should be a bumper sticker.
That was good.
Nobody would remember the Chris thing, but oh well. Okay, let's see if we can get through one, maybe two more stories before we transition over to what surely will be the superior hour, Anna Kasparian's second hour. Okay. For those of you who support a raise to the minimum wage across the country, we've got a little bit more positive evidence for what it could do to make the country better and stronger. It could perhaps save the U.S. government billions of dollars every single year for a reason that you might not expect. But first, a little bit of information about the minimum wage currently. Currently, half of all people earning under $10.10 per hour, as humans say it, roughly 11.9 million Americans receive some form of means-tested benefits from the government, like the Earned Income Tax Credit, food stamps, and others. So for those of you who don't currently make the minimum wage that's been proposed, you're more likely to have some sort of means benefit, government benefit. If the minimum wage had been pegged to the overall productivity rate of the U.S. economy since 1968, workers would be earning about $18.42 per hour today.
Jesus Christ.
I've seen that number higher in some studies.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Heads would explode. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're freaking out over $15 an hour. Can you imagine if someone proposed
They're freaking out over 10.10.
Oh my God.
15?
Yeah, that's true. That's a very
blood would pour from eye
very
sockets.
good point. Which is why I love like Obama's. It wasn't even a proposal. It's actually going to happen. All of the new government workers are going to get paid $10.10 an hour, and everyone's like, wow.
They're going to be living
great.
high on the hog.
Yeah.
But let's see. What could we actually do for America if we did raise it to the 10.10 that, as Anna said, government workers are going to get? If everybody got it. EPI's report, it's a think tank, found that if minimum wage were boosted from its current level of $7.25 per hour to $10.10, as proposed by the Fair Minimum Wage Act of 2014, more than 1.7 million Americans would no longer have to rely on public assistance programs. This would produce $7.6 billion per year or more in savings for the federal government.
So think about that for a second, because I absolutely love that. This actually reminds me a lot about restaurant industry workers who rely on us paying them tips in order to make ends meet, right? It basically puts all the pressure on the customer to help with the income of these individuals that are working, right? Which means that the business owners don't have to worry about it as much. In some states, they pay as little as, I think it's $2.15.
I at one point was getting like $2.35 as a waiter.
Yeah, it's a little over $2, okay, an hour, which means that after they get taxed, like that money just goes to the government,
zero.
right?
I frequently would get checks that are $0.
Yes, and so they rely solely on their tips, and that puts all the pressure on us to pay them, okay?
Yeah.
The same is true of people who are getting the current minimum wage, people in the restaurant industry, people who are working at Walmart, at the Walmarts of the country, barely making any money. They are going to rely on government programs that our tax money funds, okay? So that means that all these big corporations and all these business owners just rely on the American taxpayer to take care of their employees.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but they're fine with the way that it is right now.
They're really the biggest welfare queens. When you really think about, corporations like Walmart, aside from the corporate tax loopholes that they get to take advantage of, they also get to take advantage of the fact that they underpay their employees and the American taxpayer picks up the slack.
Yeah, no, I was reading today that Walmart is saying that they're going to phase out all minimum wage positions in the near future. I hope that means not firing them. They're going to pay them more. They say that there's only 6,000 people at Walmart that currently make minimum wage out of the 1.6 million employees they have, which, considering the number of Walmarts, so they just choose one person at each store to say, you're getting minimum wage, buddy. And by the way, when they say that they only have 6,000 at minimum wage, God knows how many they have at plus 15 cents per hour. But anyway, obviously, so this is good news. It would save a ton of money for the government, $7.6 billion. I mean, that would allow us to waste so much money in unnecessary wars, buying planes and then not using them and things like that. Yeah. You could buy so many more cruise missiles. It would be awesome. But no, we're not currently going to have this $10.10 per hour. We also have this interesting chart, by the way. Can we bring this up and talk about this for just a minute? Showing there the real value of the federal minimum wage. Yeah, I mean, look, you see what we actually have down there in the red line, and then if it had kept pace with U.S. total economic productivity, $19.43 in about a year.
By the way, when there was a point in my life, which was, I don't know, like a month ago, when I wasn't making enough money to go out there and actually spend, right? I wouldn't go out there and spend, right? So that meant that all of those businesses out there that are underpaying their employees, they're creating this working class of people who can barely afford to put food on the tables for their children. They're not going to go out there and spend on any type of luxury item or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I mean, what stimulates the economy is making sure that you have a strong middle class. Yeah. And we're getting away from that, okay? Just so we can make these corporations and millionaires and billionaires even more wealthy. It's a really, really screwed up system. Yeah. And when Republicans say that they care about the economy and they care about government waste, think about how disingenuous they are, especially considering all of the unnecessary wars that they fund, and especially considering the fact that they want to keep minimum wage as low as possible so all of these people continue to work long hours and still not have the money that's necessary to live a decent life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think subconsciously they hope that if they force you in a position where you have to grind it out with multiple jobs, working 50, 60, 70 or more hours per week, you won't have the time or the mental energy left to contemplate how horribly screwed up our political and economic system is. Yeah. And they benefit from that. And finally, so we're talking here about the benefits of raising minimum wage. Obviously, there are people who are against it who are going to say, well, you know, if you raise the minimum wage, they're just going to have to throw that onto the products, and so you're going to end up losing the money anyway.
Yeah.
As if the only thing that goes into the price of a product is what they pay the worker. That is a small portion of the total cost, which means that it would only raise the price a very small portion. I mean, we're fighting about trying to get the federal minimum wage to catch up just a little bit with where it should have been based on information from 1976 or something. Like, we should be talking about guaranteed minimum income. Like, there are some places in the world where they're talking about maximum incomes and things like that. And we're here talking about a couple of dollars per hour. The ability to buy one more Big Mac per day. That's what we have to fight for in America. How horribly backwards are we in 2014? Anyway, that's the end of the first hour. We're running out of time. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, it's going to be for something awesome. Anna taking over and leading the second hour.
All right.
I'm excited. I'm sure you're excited as well. Let us know how excited by tweeting at #TYTLive.
We talk about TYT Army being so strong. Usually they help us run our show. Now they're going to help us run the country.
Like this!
It's time that we reclaim democracy for the people.
We had a huge victory for Wolfpack.
When Lincoln said this was a country by, of, and for, he said of the people, not of corporations.
Our representatives don't represent us. Whoa! Democracy!
United!
We are!
We are!
Too strong!
There's thousands of volunteers, and you could be among them.
With Wolfpack, the mission is so clear.
Money is killing our democracy.
96% of Americans want it.
When you get the power back, oh, that feels good. This is just the beginning. Let's go get them, man. Up and at them. Knock, knock.
We're coming for them!
Wolf-pack.com.